The amber sunset bathed Vixara, capital city of Vixara, in a warm glow that made the crystalline spires of the royal palace shimmer like flames. George Sullivan stood on the balcony of the Earth Embassy, watching as the city transformed in the fading light. After 15 years as a Special Forces operative and another 5 as a private security consultant, he found this diplomatic posting oddly peaceful, if somewhat boring. Enjoying the view, Sullivan. Ambassador Hayes appeared beside him, dressed in formal diplomatic attire. "Yes, ma'am," George replied, straightening his posture. At 42, he still maintained the disciplined bearing of his military days. "The architecture here is unlike anything on Earth." "Indeed. And tonight you'll see something even more remarkable." Hayes handed him a formal invitation card, made of some iridescent material that felt both like paper and silk. "The royal palace is hosting a diplomatic reception, and Princess Alatha herself will be present." George raised an eyebrow. "The heir to the throne." "The first female heir in Vexaran history," Hayes confirmed. "It's part of the Reform Festival marking their new era of progressivism. Your presence is requested as my security advisor." "With respect, Ambassador, I'm not sure I'm the right choice for a fancy royal event." Hayes fixed him with a stern look. "You speak 3 Earth languages, have a doctorate in anthropology that you never use, and can disarm an attacker in 7 different ways. You're exactly who I need at this event. Besides, your exemplary service record speaks for itself." George sighed. His exemplary record was why he'd ended up on this distant planet in the first place. A place to quietly serve out his remaining years of government service after the controversy of his last mission. A hostage rescue gone sideways had left him decorated, but disgraced in the eyes of many of his peers. Following orders versus saving civilian lives, he'd chosen the latter and paid for it with his career. 19:00 hours at the palace entrance, he conceded. "Standard diplomatic security protocols." "Yes, though the Vexarans handle most of the security themselves. This is more about representation," Hayes smiled. "And Sullivan, try to enjoy yourself. The princess is quite remarkable." The royal palace of Vexara was a marvel of alien architecture, a structure that seemed to defy gravity, with floating platforms connected by bridges of light and walls that shifted colors with the movement of nearby people. George felt distinctly out of place in his formal Earth diplomatic uniform, which seemed drab compared to the elaborate attire of the Vexaran nobility. Guards with ceremonial spears and modern energy weapons stood at attention as diplomats and nobles from across the galaxy mingled. George maintained a professional distance from Ambassador Hayes, scanning the crowds out of habit. The Vexarans were humanoid, but distinctly alien, taller than most humans with skin that ranged from pale blue to deep violet, and bore intricate patterns of spots that George had learned indicated family lineage. A hush fell over the gathering as royal attendants entered, followed by Princess Alatha. George found himself unexpectedly captivated. She moved with ethereal grace, her violet skin adorned with a constellation of pale spots that trailed from her temples, down her neck, and disappeared beneath her formal attire. Her eyes, large and luminous, were the color of Earth's oceans. The Princess Alatha Kem Vixara, first daughter of the royal line, heir apparent to the eternal throne, announced a royal herald. The princess began to address the gathering, her voice melodious, even through the universal translator everyone wore. She spoke of reform, of opening Vexara to greater galactic collaboration, of changes to ancient traditions that had kept their society isolated for too long. George noticed the reactions among the Vexaran nobles, some nodding in approval, others watching with thinly veiled disdain. One figure in particular caught his attention, a tall male Vexaran with elaborate royal insignia and a face set in stern disapproval. The ambassador had briefed him on key figures. This would be Prince Zuth, the princess's uncle and leader of the conservative faction opposed to her reforms. As Alatha concluded her speech, servers began to circulate with refreshments. George accepted a glass of some local beverage, but didn't drink, keeping his attention on the room. Something felt off, a tension in the air, beyond mere political disagreement. The princess moved gracefully through the crowd, stopping to converse with various dignitaries. As she approached the Earth delegation, George noticed a server moving quickly toward her, too purposefully, hand reaching inside his serving garment. Years of combat training took over. George shoved past two diplomats, lunging toward the princess, as the server pulled out a ceremonial dagger with a distinctive curved blade. The attacker's arm was already in motion when George threw himself between the weapon and the princess. The blade sliced deeply into his side, instead of finding its intended target. George grunted in pain, but managed to grab the assailant's wrist, twisting until the dagger clattered to the floor. With his other hand, he struck the attacker's throat, sending him staggering backward into the arms of suddenly alert royal guards. "Secure the princess!" George shouted, pressing his hand against his bleeding side. The room erupted in chaos, guards surrounding Alatha, diplomats retreating to the walls, nobles calling for their own security. George's vision began to blur, the pain intensifying as adrenaline gave way to shock. The last thing he saw before collapsing was Princess Alatha's face above him, her expression one of shock and something else, something like wonder. "The human saved me," she was saying to someone out of his field of vision. "Invoke the Thiassi. We owe him a life debt." George drifted in and out of consciousness, catching fragments of conversation around him. Unfamiliar voices spoke in the Vexaran language, occasionally switching to English. "Serious, but not fatal. Royal healing chambers. The Thiassi is sacred law, it must be honored. Earth Embassy has been notified." When he finally regained full consciousness, George found himself in a room unlike any hospital he'd ever seen. The walls pulsed with soft blue light, and something cool and gelatinous covered his wounded side. He tried to sit up, wincing at the pain that followed. "Please remain still, George Sullivan." The melodious voice belonged to Princess Alatha, who sat beside his bed. Up close, the pattern of spots on her skin reminded him of star constellations. "The healing membrane needs time to complete its work." "Your Highness," George attempted a respectful nod. "Are you unharmed?" A smile curved her lips. "Thanks to you, yes. The assassin has been captured and is being interrogated." George relaxed slightly. "Good. Ambassador Hayes will want to know." "Your ambassador has been informed of everything, including your new status," Alatha interrupted. "My status?" The princess's expression grew solemn. "When you placed yourself between me and death, you triggered an ancient tradition among my people. It is called Thiassi, the life debt. By saving my life with disregard for your own, you have created a sacred bond that cannot be broken." George frowned. "I was just doing my job, Your Highness." "Nevertheless, the Thiassi has been invoked and witnessed by the royal court. It is binding." She stood, her formal robes shimmering with embedded crystals. "Once you have healed the priestess, Sirona will explain the 3 stages of the bond and what they entail. For now, rest." As she moved toward the door, she paused and looked back. "Thank you, George Sullivan. Few would risk themselves for an alien princess." After she departed, Ambassador Hayes entered, looking both concerned and amused. "Sullivan, you've really done it now," she said, taking the seat the princess had vacated. "Done what exactly?" George asked, feeling increasingly uneasy. Hayes sighed. "The Thiassi is one of their most sacred traditions. By saving Princess Alatha's life, you've bound yourself to her in ways their culture takes very seriously. It's like a combination of life debt, sacred protection, and—" She hesitated. "And what?" "Well, historically, many Thiassi bonds have culminated in marriage alliances." George nearly sat bolt upright before the pain reminded him to stay still. "Marriage ambassador. I'm here as diplomatic security, not a potential royal consort." "Calm down," Hayes said. "I've been assured by the royal chamberlain that the Thiassi has evolved over centuries. It's more symbolic now, a bond of loyalty and mutual protection. But it does mean you'll be reassigned." "Reassigned?" "The princess has requested you serve as her cultural advisor, to help her understand Earth customs as she prepares for greater diplomatic engagement with our planet. Hayes smiled wryly. Congratulations on your promotion, Sullivan. You're now going to be working directly with the future ruler of Vexara. George stared at the ceiling, wondering how protecting a princess from assassination had somehow landed him in what amounted to an arranged royal engagement. Does Earth Command know about this? They've been briefed. This could actually work in our favor diplomatically. The princess is the progressive hope for Vexara's future, and having an Earth representative in her inner circle could significantly advance our interests. So I'm a political pawn now. Hayes stood. You're a decorated soldier who's been given an unprecedented opportunity. The conservative faction led by Prince Zeth has opposed closer ties with Earth for decades. This incident may have just changed the course of interplanetary relations. She moved toward the door. Get some rest. You'll begin your new duties once the royal healers clear you. After 3 days in the healing chambers, the gelatinous membrane that had covered George's wound dissolved, leaving only a faint blue scar. A royal attendant provided him with new clothing, a blend of Earth military styling and Vexaran formal wear, and escorted him to an ornate chamber deep within the palace. There, he met Priestess Corona, an elderly Vexaran female whose elaborate spot patterns covered not just her face, but her entire visible skin. She wore robes of deep indigo and carried a staff topped with the same curved design as the assassin's dagger. George Sullivan of Earth, she greeted him with a formal bow. I am the keeper of ancient ways and guardian of the Theasi tradition. Priestess. George returned the bow, having studied the proper protocols. I understand there are aspects of this tradition I need to learn. Indeed. She gestured for him to sit on a cushion across from her. Between them was a small pedestal, holding a glowing crystal. The Theasi is among our oldest and most sacred practices. When one sacrifices their safety to preserve another's life, it creates a bond our ancestors believed was blessed by the stars themselves. She touched the crystal, and it projected what looked like ancient Vexaran text into the air. The Theasi unfolds in 3 stages. The first is acknowledgement, which has already occurred when Princess Alatha invoked the Theasi as you lay wounded. And the second stage? George asked. Truth, said Sirona. Before the next full turn of our moon, you and the princess must undertake the ritual of shared revelation. You will each reveal truths about yourselves that you have shared with no other. This strengthens the bond through vulnerability and trust. George shifted uncomfortably. And the third stage? Unity, she replied. The final stage can take many forms depending on the individuals bound by Theasi. In ancient times, it was always culminated by marriage binding royal houses or clans together. In modern times, it may be satisfied by a formal alliance or oath of eternal loyalty. George nodded slowly. I understand the princess is the first female heir in your history. Does that change how the Theasi is observed? Sirona's expression softened slightly. You are perceptive Earthborn. Indeed, Princess Alatha's ascension breaks with thousands of years of male rule. The Theasi itself is gender-neutral in our texts, but its application has been affected by our patriarchal traditions. Some in the court see her invocation of Theasi with an alien as further evidence she will not be bound by ancient restrictions, including her uncle Prince Zeth. The priestess's eyes narrowed. You would be wise to speak carefully of royal matters human. But yes, the prince represents those who believe in preserving our ways unchanged. She stood. You will be summoned when the time comes for the truth ritual. Until then, I suggest you learn as much about our culture as possible. As George settled into his new role as cultural advisor to Princess Alatha, he found the palace was a labyrinth of political intrigue and ancient traditions. His quarters, while luxurious by Earth standards, were positioned within the princess's royal wing, close enough to be called upon yet separate enough to avoid scandal. Ambassador Hayes visited occasionally, debriefing him on diplomatic developments and providing updates from Earth Command, who had taken keen interest in his unprecedented position. "They want reports, of course," Hayes told him during one such visit. "Nothing that would betray the princess's confidence, but observations about court politics, attitudes toward Earth, anything that might help our relations move forward." "I'm not a spy ambassador," George replied firmly. "No one's asking you to be. Just be our eyes and ears. The princess clearly trusts you. Use that to foster understanding between our worlds." His daily duties involved accompanying Alatha to various functions, explaining Earth customs when relevant diplomatic questions arose, and increasingly offering his perspective on security matters. The assassination attempt had made the palace security forces reassess their protocols, and George's military background proved valuable. Captain Garoth, commander of the Royal Guard, initially viewed George with suspicion. "I fail to understand why the princess keeps an alien so close after an attempt on her life," he said during one security briefing. "Perhaps because I was the one who stopped that attempt," George replied evenly. Garoth's spots darkened with emotion. "One success does not make you an expert on Vexaran security, human." "No, but 15 years in Earth Special Forces and 5 in private security gives me perspective your people might lack." George held the captain's gaze. The assassin knew palace protocols. He had inside help. The accusation hung in the air, causing murmurs among the other guards present. Garoth dismissed them, waiting until he and George were alone. "You make dangerous claims, Sullivan." "I make observations." The blade was a ceremonial kethra used only by nobility. The server knew exactly when to approach, when the guard rotation would create a momentary blind spot. "Those aren't coincidences." Garoth leaned closer. "And who would you suggest harbors such treasonous intent?" "I haven't been here long enough to know, but I'd start by looking at who benefits most if the princess's reforms fail." The captain seemed to consider this. "Watch yourself, Earthborn. The Thiassi protects you from much, but not everything." He started to leave, then paused. "But your observations are noted." As the day of the truth ritual approached, George found himself spending more time with Princess Alatha. Their formal meetings about cultural exchange gradually became longer, more personal conversations. He learned that despite her royal upbringing, she had a curious mind and genuine interest in Earth culture. "Your world has over 200 sovereign nations," she asked, during one such conversation in the palace gardens. "How do you maintain order with such fragmentation?" "Not always easily," George admitted. "We've had our share of conflicts, still do, but we've also built institutions to help us cooperate on global challenges." Alatha's expression grew thoughtful as she traced patterns in the reflecting pool between them. "My reforms seek something similar for Vexara. For millennia we've been isolated, suspicious of outsiders. But the galaxy is changing and we must change with it." "Change isn't easy," George said, "especially for those who benefit from the status quo." Her eyes met his. "Like my uncle. You've noticed his opposition." "It would be hard not to. He makes no secret of his disapproval." "Zoth believes the old ways preserved us through countless challenges. He sees my reforms as disrespect to our ancestors," she sighed. "Perhaps he's right." "Do you believe that—" "No," she said firmly. "But doubt finds me in quiet moments." She stood her ceremonial robes catching the light. "Tomorrow is the truth ritual. Are you prepared?" George stood as well. "As much as I can be. Though I'm not sure what truth I could offer that would be meaningful to you." Alatha stepped closer, close enough that he could see the delicate patterns where her spots faded into the violet of her skin. "The ritual doesn't seek grand revelations, George. It seeks authentic connection, the kind that forms when beings allow themselves to be truly seen by another." Her proximity stirred something unexpected in him, a feeling he quickly suppressed. She was alien royalty, and he was a diplomatic placeholder, nothing more. "Then I'll do my best to be authentic," he promised. The truth ritual was conducted in an ancient temple beyond the palace walls, a structure that predated even the royal dynasty. Priestess Corona led them through winding corridors, lit only by bioluminescent plants, until they reached a circular chamber with a pool of silvery liquid at its center. George and Alatha sat on opposite sides of the pool with Sirona standing between them. No other witnesses were present. The ritual demanded absolute privacy. The waters of revelation will respond to truth and reject falsehood, Sirona explained. Each of you will offer 3 truths, alternating between you. The waters will show images reflecting these truths, visible to all present. She sprinkled some crystalline substance into the pool, causing it to glow more brightly. Princess Alatha, as the beneficiary of the life debt, you will begin. Alatha closed her eyes briefly, then spoke in a clear voice. I carry the weight of being the first female heir, not as an honor, but as a burden I did not seek. The silvery waters swirled, then formed an image of a younger Alatha, kneeling before the current monarch, her father George assumed, as a ceremonial crown was placed on her head. Her expression in the vision showed not pride, but resignation. I was the 3rd child, never meant to rule, she continued. My brothers died in the northern conflict with the Scytherian Empire. Their deaths thrust me into a position I spent no part of my youth preparing for. The waters shifted again, showing 2 young male Vexarans in military attire, then the same scene of royal succession. George felt a deep empathy watching these private moments of her life revealed. It explained much about her determination to bring change. She had not been indoctrinated from birth in the traditions her uncle so fiercely defended. George Sullivan, Sirona intoned, your truth. George took a deep breath. I disobeyed direct orders on my last mission on Earth, an action that saved 12 civilian lives, but cost me my career and the respect of my fellow soldiers. The waters showed a scene that made George flinch, a burning building himself, in military gear, leading a group of terrified civilians away, while gunfire erupted in the background. Then another image, George, standing before a military tribunal, medals being removed from his uniform. I was ordered to prioritize capturing a high-value target over rescuing hostages. He continued, his voice growing rough with emotion. I chose the hostages. My target escaped and later orchestrated an attack that killed 23 people. I live with knowing my choice may have saved 12, but cost 23. Alatha's expression showed not judgment but deep understanding. The burden of command, she said softly. Every choice saves some and condemns others. Sirona nodded for Alatha to continue. I fear I am not strong enough to overcome the opposition to my reforms, the princess admitted. Some nights, I wake believing I will fail my people, and our world will remain trapped in increasingly dangerous isolation. The waters showed her alone in royal chambers, pacing, visibly distressed. Then the image shifted to show her facing a council of elder Vexarans, their expressions hostile. George felt a surge of protectiveness. The public face of the poised, confident princess concealed this private anguish. When Sirona looked to him again, George found his second truth emerging more easily. Since my disgrace, I've believed my life had lost its purpose. Taking this diplomatic posting was a way to disappear, to serve out my remaining years in obscurity, where I couldn't make another mistake that would cost lives. The waters revealed George in his embassy quarters alone, staring at military honors stored in a box, his expression empty. Then, the scene of him jumping in front of the assassin's blade. The moment I saw that blade heading toward you, he said, meeting Alatha's gaze directly, was the first time in years I acted without doubt. The atmosphere in the chamber had changed, the formal ritual, transformed into something more intimate. For the final exchange, Sirona stepped back, allowing them to speak directly to one another. Alatha's final truth came in a whisper. Despite having thousands of my own kind to choose from, I have never found one I could trust with my true self, until meeting you, an alien from another world. The waters showed her surrounded by Vexaran nobility, all maintaining a careful distance, then transformed to show her sitting with George in the palace gardens, laughing freely. George's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. His final truth emerged not from calculation, but from the moment itself. In saving your life, I found something I thought I'd lost forever, The certainty that some things are worth any risk. The waters showed not a past memory, but something else. George standing beside Alatha, before what appeared to be the royal council, both of them facing opposition together. Priestess Sirona approached the pool, sprinkling more crystals that caused the waters to glow brightly before fading to normal. "The second stage is complete," she announced. "The Thiasi bond has been strengthened through truth. You are now bound by sacred knowledge of one another." As they left the temple, George found himself walking closer to Alatha than protocol would normally permit. Something fundamental had changed between them, an understanding that transcended their different species and backgrounds. "Thank you for your honesty," Alatha said as they approached the royal transport. "Especially about the burden you carry regarding those lost lives." "Your truths were no less difficult," he replied. "The expectations placed on you are enormous." She smiled sadly. "As are those you place on yourself." She hesitated, then added, "The waters showed a vision of us standing together before the council. Such visions are said to glimpse possible futures, not merely reflect the past." "Then perhaps you won't have to face your opposition alone," George said. Her hand briefly touched his arm the first time she had initiated physical contact. "Perhaps not." 2 days after the truth ritual, Captain Gareth summoned George to the security command center. The Vexaran's demeanor had changed noticeably since their last confrontation. There was a reluctant respect in his bearing now. "Sullivan, I've been investigating your claims about inside help in the assassination attempt," he said, without preamble, activating a holographic display. "These are communication records from the palace internal network." There was an unusual burst of encrypted transmissions just before the diplomatic reception. George studied the data. "Can you trace the source?" "Not precisely. The encryption is sophisticated." Gareth's spots darkened with frustration. "But I've narrowed it to the Royal Administrative Section, where senior advisors and family members have offices," George noted. "Including Prince Zeth." Gareth's expression hardened. "Be careful, Sullivan. Accusing a royal without proof is treason, Thiasi bond or not." "I'm not accusing anyone yet, but we need to increase the princess's security immediately. If the first attempt failed, there will likely be another," Gareth finished. "Already done. I've doubled her personal guard and implemented new protocols." "Does she know?" The captain hesitated. "Not the details. The princess can be stubborn about security restrictions." George couldn't help but smile slightly. "I've noticed." "She trusts you," Gareth said, his tone suggesting this remained somewhat incomprehensible to him. "Perhaps you can convince her to exercise more caution." "I'll try." George found Alatha in her study reviewing documents for an upcoming reform council. Since the truth ritual, he had noticed subtle changes in how the palace staff treated him, less like an alien curiosity and more like someone with legitimate standing in the royal circle. "Your Highness," he greeted her formally, aware of the attendants present. She looked up with a warm smile. "George, please join me." She dismissed the attendants with a graceful gesture. Once they were alone, he briefed her on Gareth's findings. Her expression grew grave. "You believe my uncle is behind this," she said. It wasn't a question. "I believe we should consider all possibilities. Anyone who opposes your reforms has motive." Alatha sighed, setting aside her documents. "Zeth has been like a father to me since my brothers died. He may oppose my policies, but assassination—" She shook her head. "It would destroy our house, our lineage." "Unless he could claim the throne himself," George pointed out gently. "That's not how succession works." But doubt had crept into her voice. "Succession rules can change, especially in times of crisis." George leaned forward. "Captain Gareth has increased your security detail. I'd ask that you cooperate with the new measures, at least until we identify who's behind the threat." She studied him for a moment. "The truth ritual revealed much between us, George. I've shown you my fears. Now I ask you, do you truly believe my own blood would seek my death?" He met her gaze steadily. "In my experience, power motivates people to cross lines they once thought unthinkable. I've seen it on Earth, and I suspect some principles are universal. After a moment, she nodded. I will heed the security precautions, but I will not cancel my public appearances for the Reform Festival. To hide now would show weakness. Then we'll make sure you're protected, George promised. The Reform Festival was a week-long celebration marking Vixara's gradual opening to galactic society. The royal family participated in numerous public ceremonies, culminating in a procession through Vixara's ancient Grand Avenue. Despite heightened security, George remained uneasy. His military instincts told him they were missing something. He had taken to carrying a concealed energy weapon despite the royal prohibition against armed aliens in the palace. On the third day of the festival, George accompanied Alatha to a ceremony at the Historical Archives, where she would formally open previously restricted knowledge to public access. The massive building with its soaring crystalline dome was filled with dignitaries and scholars from across the planet. As Alatha concluded her address and moved to activate the symbolic crystal key that would unlock the archives, George noticed a slight movement in the rafters above. A glint of metal caught his eye. "Down!" he shouted, lunging toward Alatha as something whistled through the air. He tackled her to the ground as a ceremonial dart embedded itself in the podium where she had stood. Chaos erupted. Royal guards swarmed toward them, but George was already pulling Alatha toward a side exit he had memorized during his security assessment. "Stay close," he ordered, all protocol forgotten in the emergency. They hurried down a service corridor as shouts and energy weapon discharges echoed behind them. George's hand found hers, guiding her through the unfamiliar passages. "There's a secure transport bay on the lower level," he explained as they ran. Before they could reach it, a section of wall slid open ahead of them, revealing a female Vexaran in nondescript clothing. Her hand flew to her mouth in shock at seeing the princess. "Your Highness," she gasped. "Quickly this way." George positioned himself between Alatha and the stranger. "Who are you?" "Kira, Botanical Garden staff," she replied hurriedly. "I'm with the Reform Movement. These service tunnels connect to the old sanctuary system. I can get you to safety." Alatha stepped forward. "I know of your group, Kira. You've supported my reforms publicly." George remained suspicious. "How did you happen to be here during an assassination attempt?" "We've had concerns about your safety," Kira admitted. "Some of us have been monitoring threats. Please, we must hurry. There are others pursuing you." As if to confirm her words, shouts echoed from further down the corridor they had been following. George made a split-second decision. "Lead the way," he told Kira, "but I'll be watching you." Kira guided them through a dizzying network of hidden passages that George realized must date back centuries. These were created during the Scytherian conflicts, she explained as they moved. A way for royalty to escape siege. "How does a gardener know palace escape routes?" George asked, still wary. "The Reform Movement has members throughout the palace staff," Kira replied. "We share knowledge to protect the princess. Many have worked here for generations, passing down secrets." They emerged in what appeared to be an abandoned temple complex at the edge of the city. Several other Vexarans waited there, clearly shocked to see their princess arrive with Kira. "Your Highness," one older male stepped forward, bowing deeply. "We had no idea Kira would bring you here. Our sanctuary is yours." Alatha, composed despite the circumstances, addressed them with royal dignity. "I thank you for your loyalty. Who leads your movement?" "We all do in different ways," the elder replied. "I am Varric, once a royal historian before Prince Zuth had me removed for documenting reform movements in our past." George remained vigilant, checking exits and potential threats, while listening to the conversation. "We need to contact Captain Garoth," he interrupted. "The palace will be in chaos, believing the princess is missing or captured." Kira nodded. "We have secure communication methods." She handed George a small crystal device. "This will reach the captain directly." While George established contact with Garoth, Alatha conversed with the reformers, learning more about their organization and support among the general population. When he returned, her expression was thoughtful. Captain Garoth is establishing a secure perimeter around this location, he informed her. He'll arrive personally to escort you back to the palace. And what of the assassin, she asked. Captured. A member of the outer province nobility with ties to conservative factions. But he's refusing to name who hired him. Varric stepped forward. Princess, we have been gathering evidence of conspiracy for months. Documents, recorded conversations, financial transfers. We believed Prince Zeth was merely opposing your reforms politically, but recent evidence suggests something more sinister. Show me, Alatha commanded. The evidence was compelling recordings of Zeth meeting with known extremists' financial transactions, coinciding with the arrival of the first assassin, encrypted messages that, while not explicitly mentioning assassination, contained coded language about removing obstacles. When Garoth arrived with a full security detail, Alatha insisted the reformers be given protection rather than arrested. They saved my life today, she stated firmly, and they've provided evidence that may identify those truly responsible. Back at the palace, security had been increased to unprecedented levels. Alatha was sequestered in the royal wing with George and Garoth coordinating her protection personally. The evidence against Prince Zeth is circumstantial, Garoth admitted as they reviewed security footage. Significant but not conclusive enough to accuse a royal of treason. Then we need more, George said. The assassins were meant to look like isolated extremists, but there's a pattern. Whoever is behind this will try again. The succession ceremony is in 3 days, Garoth noted grimly. The princess will be formally recognized as heir before the entire royal court. It would be the perfect symbolic moment for a final attempt. Then we use that, George suggested. We let it be known that the ceremony will proceed despite the attempts. We make it appear that security will be focused on external threats. Garoth's spots darkened with understanding. While actually setting a trap for the insider. Exactly. When they presented the plan to Alatha, she approved with one condition. I will not be replaced by a body double or hidden away. If we are to expose the traitor, I must be visibly present. Your Highness, Garoth began to object. The Thiassi bond reaches its final stage at the succession ceremony, she interrupted. George and I must both be present to complete it before the royal court. George looked at her in surprise. They had not discussed the final stage since the truth ritual. The unity of our worlds depends on this succession proceeding as planned, she continued. We will draw out the conspirators, expose them, and move forward with a stronger alliance. After Garoth departed to make arrangements, George confronted Alatha privately. You didn't mention the Thiassi culmination, because it was not relevant until now. She moved to the window, looking out over the city. The final stage traditionally occurs at a significant royal event. The succession ceremony is the obvious choice. And what form will this unity take? He asked cautiously. She turned to face him. That depends on us. Her expression softened. The truth ritual revealed much between us, George. I believe you felt it too, a connection neither of us expected. He couldn't deny it. Something had grown between them since that first moment, when he'd taken a blade meant for her. What had begun as duty had evolved into something deeper, transcending their different worlds. The unity can be a formal alliance between our peoples, she continued, or it can be more personal. Traditionally, Thiassi culminated in marriage-binding royal houses. But I would never presume. Princess, he interrupted gently. Alatha, whatever form the unity takes, I will honor it. But we should focus on keeping you alive to see it completed. Her smile held a hint of sadness. Always the protector. Very well, we will concentrate on security now. The future will reveal itself in time. The day of the succession ceremony arrived, the palace transformed with ancient symbols of Vexaran royalty. The Great Hall had been secured under Garoth's supervision, with hidden guards, supplementing the visible ceremonial ones. George wore formal attire that blended Earth and Vexaran styles, symbolizing his unique position. Ambassador Hayes and other Earth dignitaries were given prominent seating, signifying the growing alliance between their worlds. Prince Zeth presided over the ceremony as royal elder, his elaborate regalia emphasizing his high status. If he was indeed behind the assassination attempts, his composure revealed nothing. The ritual began with ancient invocations, Priestess Sirona leading the proceedings. As the moment approached for Alatha to be officially named, Heir George maintained vigilant watch from his position near the royal dais. Sirona raised the ceremonial crown. "Princess Alatha Kemvixara, approach and kneel before your destiny." As Alatha moved forward, George noticed Prince Zeth's hand move slightly beneath his robes. Without hesitation, George lunged forward, placing himself between Alatha and her uncle, just as Zeth withdrew a concealed weapon, the same type of ceremonial dagger used in the first assassination attempt. "Traitor!" George shouted, grabbing Zeth's wrist. The hall erupted in gasps and cries as royal guards surrounded them. Zeth's expression contorted with rage. "You dare accuse me? Guards, remove this alien immediately." But Garroth stepped forward instead. "Your Highness, stay your hand. We have been investigating the assassination attempts and have evidence of conspiracy." Another figure emerged from the crowd, Kira the Reformer, who had helped them escape the second attempt. She carried a crystal data device. The prince's private communications secured from his chambers. They detail arrangements with both assassins and plans for today's final attempt. Zage's spots darkened with fury. "Lies, fabrications by the reform radicals." "The evidence speaks for itself," Garroth replied firmly, "including financial transfers from your personal accounts to the assassins' families." The gathered nobility watched in shock as Zeth's composure crumbled. "She would destroy everything," he shouted, pointing at Alatha. "Thousands of years of tradition, our very way of life sacrificed to alien influence." Alatha stepped forward, her expression not of anger, but of sadness. "Uncle, I sought to preserve our world by helping it evolve. Isolation is slow death in a connected galaxy." "Better death than corruption by outside ways," Zeth spat. "Your father should never have allowed a female successor. It has weakened our bloodline, our resolve." The admission of his true motives sent another wave of murmurs through the assembly. Several nobles who had been Zeth's allies visibly distanced themselves. Sirona stepped forward. "Prince Zeth has confessed to treason against the royal succession. By ancient law, his judgment falls to the royal court." The next hours passed in a blur of ancient procedures, as Zeth was formally stripped of titles and privileges. The evidence against him was presented to the full court, leaving no doubt of his guilt. The sentence was not death. Vexar injustice had evolved beyond execution, but permanent exile from their world. As the disgraced prince was led away, the court turned its attention back to the interrupted ceremony. Sirona raised the crown once more. "Princess Alatha, come forward to claim your birthright." Alatha knelt before the priestess, but then made an unexpected gesture. "Before I accept this honor, there is another matter to address. The Thiassi bond between myself and George Sullivan of Earth has reached its final stage. In accordance with our oldest traditions, unity must be achieved." Sirona nodded solemnly. "How do you wish to fulfill the final stage, Your Highness?" Alatha rose and turned to face George. "In the spirit of both honoring tradition and embracing change, I propose a dual unity. First, a formal alliance between Vixara and Earth, with binding treaties to be negotiated immediately." She looked toward Ambassador Hayes, who nodded in affirmation. "And second," Sirona prompted. Alatha extended her hand toward George. "A personal bond between myself and the human who risked everything to protect me and our future, if he is willing." The court fell silent, all eyes on George. He stepped forward, taking her hand in a gesture that transcended their different biologies. "I am willing," he said simply. Sirona raised her staff. "Then let it be witnessed by all. The Thiassi is fulfilled through both political alliance and personal union. George Sullivan of Earth is hereby recognized as Prince Consort to the heir of Vixara." The pronouncement sent ripples of astonishment through the court, followed by a swell of approval, first from the Reform faction, then spreading until even traditionalists bowed in acceptance. The remainder of the ceremony proceeded according to ancient protocol, with Olathe formally named as successor to the throne. When the crown was placed upon her head, she stood not as an isolated monarch, but with George at her side, a living symbol of the new era she had promised. In the months that followed, the alliance between Earth and Vixara flourished. Ambassador Hayes' diplomatic status was elevated, and trade agreements established new connections between the worlds. George found himself navigating dual roles, royal consort and Earth's representative, with the same adaptability that had served him throughout his military career. The reform movement, once underground, became an official advisory council, with Kira and Varric among its leaders. Captain Garoth, now promoted to Royal Security Commander, implemented new protocols that balanced traditional ceremonies with modern protection. 1 year after the succession ceremony, Olathe and George stood on the balcony of the royal palace, watching the amber sunset that had greeted him on his first day on Vixara. Between them, cradled in Olathe's arms, was their infant daughter, the first human Vixaran child in history. The medical impossibility had been overcome through advanced genetic science, resulting in a child with pale blue skin and the faintest pattern of spots across her temples. Her eyes were earth-ocean blue like her mother's, but her features carried hints of her human father. The council is still debating what her existence means for succession law, Olathe noted with amusement. Some believe she represents the ultimate fulfillment of theosy, the literal unity of our bloodlines. George smiled, touching his daughter's small hand. And what do you believe? I believe she represents hope, Olathe replied. Proof that differences can become strengths when combined with purpose. From below came the sounds of celebration as citizens gathered for the annual Reform Festival, now commemorating not just policy changes, but a fundamental shift in Vixaran society. The isolation of centuries had given way to engagement with the galactic community, with Earth as their closest ally. When I first arrived here, I thought I was finishing my career in quiet obscurity, George mused. Instead, I found a new beginning. We both did, Olathe agreed. Though I never expected an alien blade catcher would be part of my destiny. Life Debt Royal Advisor Prince Consort, George listed with a smile. It's been quite a promotion track. Their daughter made a soft cooing sound, her tiny fingers wrapping around George's thumb with surprising strength. In her face he could see the future, not just of his unexpected family, but of two worlds finding common ground across the stars. Worth the risk? Olathe asked softly, echoing his words from the truth ritual. George met her gaze, remembering the moment he'd lunged forward to protect a princess he barely knew, changing both their destinies forever. Every time, he answered.